It's the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast with your hosts, the Wolf and Action Jackson, who are keeping rock alive by talking classic rock, hard rock, progressive rock, heavy metal, 80s music, early MTV, UK vs. US chart success, and much more. This is the home of classic album and live concert reviews and your place for interviews with artists and legends. You're rocking with the Wolf. Out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 221 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. Brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf, and I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the U.S., Mr. Gary Action Jackson. And thanks to everybody who's tuned in this year. We've had a lot of fun stuff happening with albums turning 40 and some of them turning 50. A couple of great guests on First Concert Memories, talk about the first time they saw the Struts or the Sex Pistols in their last ever concert in San Francisco. It's been a fun way to kick off 2025, and we really appreciate all of you tuning in here with us. And we've been doing a lot of albums that are hitting big anniversaries this year. Some of them the biggest of all time, like Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. Some of them more obscure, stuff that we liked that maybe not everybody else did. And I feel like this week's kind of falls somewhere in the middle as we're reviewing Behind the Sun by Eric Clapton. It's his 1985 solo album that was produced by none other than Phil Collins, who of course had the hot hand here in this 1984-1985 time frame. Eric's last album, Money and Cigarettes, had not done very well. Of course, Eric had had some serious drug and drinking problems through the late 70s. It may have gone into the 80s a bit. Once he was sober, though, he wanted to clean up his act and kind of extend his career. People weren't sure that that was possible. For the most part, there weren't any rock stars that had been around 20 years at that point. But Clapton always had amazing talent with his hands with respect to the guitar. So he got together with Phil Collins, got together with some songwriters, went to Montserrat, and made an album called Behind the Sun. Got to work with his buddy Donald Duck Dunn, his buddy Chris Stainton, and they cranked it out. Now, the record company, Warner's, didn't love it, so they had to get Ted Templeman in to work with some session players who were amazing, and some of them you'll know. People like Steve Lukather, and even Lindsey Buckingham played a little bit on this album. Nathan East came and played with him on some of these. And they got a few more, got some hits in there, and Forever Man and She's Waiting were era-defining hits. Maybe not career-defining hits for Clapton, but something that showed, hey, in the 80s, I can still be relevant. I can still make music that gets on the charts, music that follows today's trends, but still offers up some great guitar from the legendary guitar master Clapton. And longtime listeners may have heard our episodes on the Crossroads box set that was hugely influential on us in high school and college. And some of these songs definitely ended up on there, as did some of the B-sides. So as this was kind of an inflection point in Clapton's career, he's not the superstar god that he was in the 70s, but it's before he has the huge comeback with Tears in Heaven and the Unplugged album in the 90s. This is him kind of finding his footing again, using the technology of the day, some of which is very dated, but he still manages to put together a few good songs on there. And we're going to get into them here on the show. But first, we do have a little bit of business to take care of. As always, we like to mention we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a community of over 100 shows. You can find out more at pantheonpodcast.com or follow on socials at Pantheon Pods. And you gotta love our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, who's based in the UK, folks, but they ship all over the world and they procure collections from all over the world. And they have a ton of Clapton stuff from all over his amazing and lengthy career. It's got some stuff that you can only find in the UK. It's got some stuff you can only find in Japan and other spots in Europe. And the great thing is they gave us a code, UGLY, that you can use to save 10% off one entire order. Not just one item, but one entire order. So go get Cream's Farewell album. Go get an original Derek and the Dominoes print. Go get Slow Hand, right? Go get a pristine copy of Unplugged. Go get whatever your heart's desire. Get them all. And then use code UGLY and save a big, fat 10% at rarevinyl.com. Your record collection will thank you. Now back to Eric Clapton. Look, I've always admired him as one of the greatest guitar players of all time. But it was around this time that the feeling was, well, maybe he's just done. It's been over 20 years. He's had a solid run. He's not fitting in with the techno world, really. He's had some drug and alcohol problems. Maybe it's time for him to just kind of go on the oldies circuit and play blues like the B.B. Kings of the world. But that's not really what happened. And this album was a step towards getting him back up on top and redefined as a legend and not just a legacy. So here it is. We're doing Behind the Sun by Eric Clapton as it turns 40 here on The Wolf. Jumping right in. It's got to be tough if you're a living legend.
It really is. Thanks for bringing that up.
But, goodness, Jackson. But all of a sudden you find yourself in a time and place where your talent or aura is no longer appreciated and everyone's kind of moved on. And yet you're like, I know I've been around a long time, but I'm like, I'm 41. I'm not that old. I know it's kind of like sometimes being a musician or a rock and roller is like being a football player. By the time you're in your mid to late 30s, early 40s, you know the game better than you've ever known it. You understand it. It slows down for you. You're awesome at it mentally, but physically, you just can't do it anymore. That's not even the case with rock and rollers. It's just more like, everyone who's buying records right now weren't alive when you were in your heyday. So we're just going to move on to something else. And I feel like that's the position Eric Clapton was in the 80s. When the synths were everywhere, the techno was in, the MTV was everywhere, and he's like, you guys want to hear an old blues cover? And everyone's like, no, we've heard enough of those over the years, and nobody wants to hear that right now. So you're kind of at the whims of the record industry people who deal with you.
Yeah. And it really seems like this was the case for this record because, like you said, for as talented as he was, for the legend that he had built for himself, by this point in time, I guess Money and Cigarettes, his album before this, really didn't do that well commercially. And so the record company just said, you need to retool this thing to present something that is a little more current, something that the kids want to buy.
Something for the children. Yeah, no, and it's true because Money and Cigarettes didn't really go anywhere. His 1983 album, it was his first on Warner Brothers. And he's sober, I guess, at this point.
That's what it seems like, yeah.
Yeah, but, he had a song off there, I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart, that I guess was a minor hit. It's not one that has made it into, like, classic rock staples, a playlist and stuff like that. It wasn't on Crossroads, his 4-disc compilation that would come out just a few years after Behind the Sun. And it's just, it wasn't really going anywhere. Plus, it's like you're kind of you're putting your guitar towards the back a little bit and you're trying to push more like your lyrics or your singing anyway. It's like, well, it's not that he's a terrible singer. I actually think he's a pretty darn good singer for being as reluctant as he was to do it for so long. Yeah. And he sings those kind of blues songs pretty well. I mean, when he's an 18-year-old white boy, he doesn't know anything about the blues. But by the time he got to this point, he has loved and lost and gotten caught up in some things that would make you say, hey, you know what? He's earned the right to sing the blues. And I think he's actually pretty good at it.
That is a weird concept, though. Hey, I'm going to put a record out. Oh, okay. But it's not going to showcase my guitar playing. Oh, right. So what are we doing here?
Well, exactly. You're going to be a super pop star all of a sudden at 41, without this great singing voice. Yeah, I don't know.
So the other thing is, I mean, you were talking about the record company. He's got his own record. It's not a label, but it's a division. It's a something called Duck Records. But it's just interesting to me that he has this thing that he's associated with, but yet he's still at the whim of Atlantic Records. They can still tell him, you know what? No, we're not accepting this thing. It's like, your report in the 5th grade when you come back and say, this is like a D, go back and try harder.
Well, yeah, it was Warner Brothers, actually. I mean,
Warner Brothers.
Yeah, it was his first album with Warner's was Money and Cigarettes. It did not even go gold in the U.S. It had that Rock and Roll Heart song, but that came out in like 1983 when like Duran Duran and Men at Work and Michael Jackson and Def Leppard were killing it. And it's this kind of slow, I've got a rock and roll. It didn't fit in. So this time he employs Phil Collins. Yes, Phil Collins, to come in and produce his record. Now, of course, Clapton, as we spoke about last year, did tour with Roger Waters on his Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking tour. our buddy Lee Dixon came on and gave us a little bit of background on kind of what the story was with this tour and what was going on. And apparently Clapton may have been clean, but I don't think anyone on the road crew was, from what our boy says there. But that's a story for another day.
Allegedly, yes.
At least there are a few solos on this. I just can't believe that. And another thing Lee Dixon said last year that struck me as odd, and then I realized he was right, is that he's not a prolific songwriter, Eric Clapton. I'm like, well, yeah, he is. Over the last 60 years, he's written tons of songs. And while that may be correct, he's collaborated with a lot of people on a lot of those songs. And he's also, yeah, if you look at the credits on a lot of that stuff, yeah, he brings a lot of people in to help him write songs. Now, he did write, I think, more than half the songs in this record, but that means about half, were from other people. But some of that is at the behest of Warner's, because even though he had a lot of fun, apparently, making the record, there's some stuff going on. First of all, he and Pattie Boyd are starting to really realize, yeah, we probably ought to break up, which is fueling some of his writing. And, tough times beget great art. So it's like, okay, sorry about your marriage to George Harrison's ex-wife who you stole, but hey, at least we'll get some good blues out of it, right?
Right. And then what's your other problem too is that you don't have your old friends anymore to come and help you. Or at least that's the way it seems like. You figure, oh, I'm feeling bad. I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to have, whatever. And now you've taken that away from you. This is not, even though, like you said, he had a pleasant experience making this record. I'm guessing that Clapton as a person, this was a tough time for him.
Probably so, especially if you're trying to be sober and
correct,
getting pressure from a record company,
and your personal life is going down the toilet to this woman who I got to do a little more research on Pattie Boyd, because she must have been something special to drive everybody out of their mind.
Well, I mean, I think she just was a lot like the men she hung out with. And because they wanted to be with other people, she wanted to too. And who's to say she can't? She's a model. It was the swinging 60s and then the free 70s. And why not? Yeah, my wife read her autobiography. She's like, this is fascinating. Do you want to read it? I'm like, no, Pattie Boyd can't play guitar. Who cares?
I'll read about her and other things.
Exactly. It's, that's not the story I'm looking for, But so Phil Collins has been pretty busy here, right? Because he done the 83 Genesis tour and album, and he was getting his own record together, No Jacket Required, for a little bit later in 85, but through 84, he's helping Clapton. And I think he even toured with him a little bit. So he's helping Clapton do this. And then what happens is they come up with maybe a dozen or so songs. And it's kind of with him and his buddies, Donald Duck Dunn, who's, the bass player from Booker T and the MGs. He's on the bass and helping him put stuff together. And Lee Dixon, by the way, said, great guy, funny guy. And of course, he's kind of the right-hand man of Steve Cropper. He's the bass player in the Blues Brothers right next to Steve Cropper. Chris Stainton on the keyboards and the organs and stuff. I've seen him play with Chris. Chris has been in and out of his band for like 45 years or something like that. That's his buddy. Phil Collins does play some drums on here, but he also plays some electronic drums, which you know how I feel about that for the most part. But also Jamie Oldacre, who'd been with him, in and out of his band, and, a Tulsa guy. He was with Bob Seger for a while in the 70s, and he was asked to be in 461 Ocean Boulevard, but eventually, he's worked with a lot of people. He's on the drums there. And then he's got a couple of ladies who really are prominent on this. Marcy Levy, who was also known as Marcella Detroit, but she helped him write.
It was Lay Down Sally.
It was Lay Down. I was going to say, it's not Wonderful Tonight. It's Lay Down Sally. Yeah. And Sean Murphy. And they're in the videos. You can see them. They're Foxy Singer ladies. So they get through all that. Plus, a lot of the songs you'll hear on the album, plus a lot of B-sides and stuff that just didn't make it. They send it to Warner's and they're like, no. This is not good enough. The last album didn't sell and we need some more hits. So they hook him up with this guy, Jerry Lynn Williams, a guy from Texas. And he's written for, Robert Plant and B.B. King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Bonnie Raitt. But I feel like this is the first time he was kind of on the scene with someone who we would know. And after he wrote a few on this one, he contributed down the line, stuff from Journeyman and some other stuff. They kind of forced him, hey, you got to record some of these songs, and you're going to do it in L.A. with the musicians that we choose, not just your buddies.
Yeah.
who just say, oh yeah, that was great, Eric. Thanks a lot. No, they're going to force them to use their guys. Now, when I say force them, he got some of the greatest in the business, right? He got Steve Lukather of Toto fame playing guitar on a couple tracks. Lindsey Buckingham playing guitar on the 5th track, better known as Something's Happening, one of the 3 songs that Jerry Lynn wrote. He wrote See What Love Can Do, Something's Happening, and Forever Man that ended up on the record, all of them under 4 minutes long. He got Nathan East, one of the greatest bass players ever, most prolific. He's been on like 5,000 records. He was in Foreplay. I saw him with Eric Clapton on the Journeyman tour. Like I said, Greg Fillinganes, who I just saw a year ago playing in Toto. Jeff Porcaro on the drums on a couple of songs of Toto fame, but really he was just like the studio go-to drummer for everybody. Like he was just so awesome. Lenny Castro on the congas, not to be confused with Pepe Castro. And Jerry Lynn came in to back up some too. But Ted Templeman, legendary producer of Van Halen, and I guess to some extent the Doobie Brothers, he produced these sessions. He produced these songs along with Larry Warrenker from Warner. And he even ends up on, Tambourine or a couple things on a couple of these songs. So it's kind of a tale of 2 records. The stuff they did in England with his crew, or Montserrat anyway. And then some that they did in Los Angeles and North Hollywood with these other folks. So it was like the record company's like, look, we paid money to have Eric Clapton. we need some hits. And he's like, fine, just give me good ones. And he liked the stuff that Jerry Lynn Williams made. So he's like, okay, yeah, fine. And yeah, I mean, 2 of the 3 singles released were the ones that Jerry wrote. Now, here it is. Here's the, it sold 1 million copies in the U.S., only about maybe 100,000 in the UK. I'm one of the suckers who bought it because of course, this great story about Crossroads. I had to have Crossroads when it came out, right? We've talked about it on the show before. It's a 4 CD set. That's $60. What 15-year-old has $60 laying around? I don't. So I have to kind of convince my dad, look, I'll put in 30, you put in 30. You've got the great sound system and we can listen to all this together. And for anybody who says you conned your dad out because then you took them all with you, A, you keep the set together. You don't break it up. B, I just moved my father from Florida back up here. And his CDs are all like touching each other and all scratched up and they're all in horrible shape. And it's like, why would I ever give you a CD? Not to mention, once I got a good burner, I did burn him the whole thing and make him the whole set for himself. I'm sure he never listened to it. I'm sure they're all scratched up. So I did the right thing. I did the right thing for the world.
You knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, and I took all that knowledge and I used that in the creation and production of this show. So I'm a good person.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, yes, it went gold. It went platinum maybe in the US, but it only went to 34 in the Billboard charts, where it went up to number 8 in the UK, but I feel like it faded pretty quickly. And the first single, Forever Man, didn't really chart that high in England. So he's kind of focusing himself, and I think Warner's also is focusing him on the American audience. But this was released March 11th, 1985, and is over 50 minutes long. And yes, some of these are a little long. They could be cut down. We'll get into this. But do you remember the Forever Man or She's Waiting songs or videos from like 1985?
Yeah, I definitely remember the Forever Man video. It's where they've got it in the production stage deal where he's standing on a little stage above everybody else. I remember, I can't tell you, I mean, I knew the name Eric Clapton and like, oh yeah, I think he was a big time rock star coming back for this deal. Cause I didn't remember Money and Cigarettes at all, but I just remember how cool he looked in that coat.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Playing the guitar, I'm like, yeah, that's a rock star right there.
Yeah, and not too long after this, The Color of Money came out, and he did the song It's in the Way That You Use It. I think people in Hollywood started to think, okay, maybe he's not like an arena filler writing hit songs, but he can write some good songs for a movie soundtrack, right? Or they could appear in the movie. And some of the songs from this session did end up in movies. We'll get into that here a little bit later. But it's been a while since I looked at the booklet here for Behind the Sun. And it's pretty basic kind of 80s, booklet. It shows the songs and then who played on all of them and things like that. And then there's one back page. You'll see a little bit of that. There's a picture of EC.
Oh, right.
Kind of against the rural backdrop there. And then there's like a page of credits and notes. The picture, the photo, is by Pattie Clapton, not Pattie Boyd.
Interesting. All
Pattie
right.
Clapton. Yes, I thought that was interesting. And then they just kind of talk about how most of the songs are Phil Collins produced, engineered by Nick Launay at Montserrat in the West Indies. However, anything with a star on it, those three, produced by Ted Templeman and Larry Waronker, and the places in L.A. and Hollywood where they did it. In the special thanks, you've got thanks to Yvonne and the Antelopes of Desire. I don't know what that means, but it's probably some kind of code for drugs or something. But maybe not, but maybe. Who else is on there? Lee Dixon's on there, guest of the show.
Oh, nice.
Jeff Banks, Gordon Sumner, better known as Sting, Desmond and Franklin. Steve Lukather and Jeff Porcaro appear of Columbia. Phil Collins appears courtesy of Atlantic. Lindsey Buckingham appears courtesy of Elektra Asylum. It's just so funny to see him. He's not that old. I mean, he's about 40, 41. So 40 years have passed since he made this. He was a little old then. Well, geez, he's very old now.
It's funny to think 41 is old, but I mean, in this game at this time, yeah, he was ancient.
I mean, even when I was 19 or, when you were a teenager, like, oh, 40's so old. Even then, I didn't think 40 was that old because I'm like, yeah, it's older than me and I've got a long way before I get there. But 40's not that old. People are playing sports at 40. People are like getting remarried to people half their age at 40. Everyone's working really hard. At 40, 40's not that old. 50's old. And as someone on the other side of 50, I was right about that.
You're reminded of that every day.
Every day. Every single day. So he's got an incredible amount of talent on this record. I mean, Ray Cooper, his buddy, did percussion on a bunch of, on several of the songs. Having those two bass players alone, Donald Duck Dunn and Nathan East, that's huge, So all sorts of talent, you got to believe that this would have been a hit. And hey, if it went platinum after the last one didn't, well, it was. But it's not a rousing success.
Yeah. It's interesting that there's only a couple of singles on this, right? He had 1, 2, 3, and She's Waiting was UK only.
Right.
It's interesting to me that you make him go back and do this, re-record some stuff, put some new tracks on here with professional songwriters, and you only release 3 singles and really just 2.
Well, right. But I mean, it's still a pretty big success for him. I mean, going platinum is a pretty big deal. Although Journeyman would come out and go double platinum, but that's not for like another 5 years from then. And, at least 4, but it's about 5 years. And although I think Crossroads was big, August, the album that he did in 1986, that didn't do very well. I think it went gold. I think it has some good songs on it, and it's in the way they use it from The Color of Money was on there.
Right.
It had a couple other good ones on there that just weren't big hits, but it's like, yeah, we all think he's over, and then somehow with Journeyman, thanks to Crossroads 2, he can come back.
Yeah, this was that weird in-between time, right before the classic rock revival, when, he was over. This was it. Nobody wanted to listen to this anymore, and then the worm just turned. I think it was Pink Floyd's Momentary Lapse of Reason that and that tour that reignited all of this. But yeah, at this point in time, nobody wanted to hear from him on the pop circuit.
Hi, this is Jim McCarthy of the Yardbirds, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
So let's go ahead and jump into this, because I got to tell you, as much as I love Eric Clapton and the fact that I own the record, I don't love the record. There are bright spots. There's always going to be some good stuff on here, but overall, as far as the whole thing goes, I don't know. I don't know about this one.
Okay, so let's get into it then.
So let's do it. They start off with She's Waiting. Big fat riff. It was on Crossroads.
Definitely any track from this that was on Crossroads definitely had a leg up, because we listened to that quite a bit.
Quite a bit, yes. He wrote it with Peter Robinson, and Peter Robinson, he's the kind of guy who wrote songs for a lot of people, worked with Mike Rutherford and Carly Simon, Steeler's Wheel, featuring Jerry Rafferty, even Andrew Lloyd Webber and the Hollies and people like that. So he had a long career. They wrote She's Waiting. This is so synthed and so 80s. And the solo in the middle is not amazing.
It just kind of plods along. I
know.
Okay, got it.
I mean, and Peter, he played on 7 different tracks on these synths, so he is a good like composer and arranger, writer and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I like the video. I like the big riff. Apparently, he did play this at Live Aid.
Yes, he did.
First, before he played like Layla and White Room or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that gives it some more clout there. But it didn't chart. It didn't chart in the UK. It didn't chart in the US. I mean, I think it was only released as a single in the UK, but they made that big fat video about it. I don't know. I like it, but it sounds like he's warning himself about Pattie.
That's what I was going to say is that, we listen to this a ton of times. It does have that kind of cool beginning to it, and then the drums drop in, and you're listening to it, and I never really paid attention to what he was saying, but now going back and listening to it now and understanding where he was in his life, this is about his wife. It has to be. She's waiting for another lover, finally finding a stronger love. She's moving on with her life, but then did you not maybe treat her the best?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of seems like he's lamenting this relationship that is now just completely falling apart.
She's been waiting for another love, someone that she can show into her heart. And when she's finally found a stronger love, your whole world's gonna fall apart. She's waiting for another love.
Yeah, and the lyrics are fairly good here, but of course I misunderstood some as a younger man. She's been waiting for another love, someone that she can show into her heart. I thought it was shove into her heart, to be honest with you.
That sounds painful.
Someone she can shove into her heart.
Get in there.
And when she finally finds a stronger love, your whole world's going to fall apart.
Right. Yeah.
You've been abusing her for far too long. Think you're a king and she's your pawn. Get ready now, because pretty soon she'll be gone and you'll be on your own. So yeah, you realize, so it may have been like a good recording session for him, and it's great to be with Phil and Duck and a lot of his buddies, but his marriage is falling apart, and that can never be, even if you're ready to move on, it doesn't matter. You were madly in love with this person. You had to steal her away from your best friend because you loved her so much, and now it's running its course, and she's got offers. She's got other stuff she can do. She doesn't have to sit around saying, I hope he comes home tonight. She didn't have to do that at all.
Right. And then let's face it, neither did Clapton. I mean, he still had some star power left at this point in time. But just the idea that, this thing is, your whole world is going to fall apart, as he says. That's got to be traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. And then there's at the end, there's all those like whistle sounding things, and the girls are all singing together. It's likely synths.
I don't know what that is, but it disintegrates into something else. Like I even wrote down, like, what is that, a fife? Because he's got like that military drumming too.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good call.
It is kind of cool at the end when you kind of pay attention to that. I don't know. Are you trying to say that it's, you're marching away? I don't know what's happening there. It is kind of a cool little out, though.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. It's different. But yeah, the march is exactly what it is. And I guess that's Phil on the drums doing that. So, and it's a big song. It's not a fast one, but those big riffs, and his voice is, the vocal power I feel like he shows on this is pretty strong, actually.
And you mentioned the Live Aid performance. I did see a clip of that, and he sounds really good on this track. And to see they kind of show you the band, and then they kind of cut to the crowd, back to the band, but then at the end they pull to an aerial shot of RFK Stadium, and it's
massive.
Yeah. Like there isn't one square inch of space that isn't taken up. It's all the stands, the entire field. You could not have fit another person in that. I can't imagine what that was like to come out to. I mean, you've played big arenas before, but to see 100,000+ people standing there, and you're on this tiny little stage.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone will do a show about that one day. Yeah. Who knows?
Well, fingers crossed. He sounds great. The band looks good. The backup singers are amazing on that track. And it just shows that his voice, I think he's underrated as a singer.
Yeah, I mean, it took him a while to come to it, but no, I do think he has a strong voice, and he uses it on this this one. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the next song, Come See What Love Can Do. This is a Jerry Lynn Williams, right? It was the second single. It did not chart anywhere. It's also very synthed out. And this is the thing. Like, this is a blues legend, and there are all these 80s synths all over this thing. It's like, how does the blues mesh with this new, not only technology, but trend in the music industry? The solo was once again weak on this one. It kind of has an island vibe to it.
Yeah.
But he's just being a crooner who also plays guitar, not a guitar player who sings.
Yeah, and once you learn that he didn't write this song, it starts to sound more and more generic to me. Like, you know, you say, "Oh, that's Eric Clapton." Was it? I mean, that could have been. It could have been a couple other people. There's to me, there's kind of no heart to this thing.
That's my last note. And this is generic. That's it. You know, I can't believe this is the second song on the album or the second single. There's nothing very Eric Clapton about it.
Yeah.
The lyrics are pretty cheesy and don't really say much. I mean, and look, and he wrote 4 songs for Clapton. One of them is like a B-side or you know, didn't make the album. And I'm like, and this was the second best one, because he wrote Forever Man. I'm like, this is the second best one? I'm not so sure it is.
But I think that goes to the kind of song that or the kind of songwriter that you are. Are you writing something that you're feeling about personally, like She's Waiting? Or is it just like, oh yeah, you want a song here? I wrote this song. Anybody can sing this song. You know, It could be 10 other people here. Go ahead and do it. So yeah, it's cheesy. It's generic. This doesn't really do anything for me.
When the words are in the music is the song. The world would be so happy if we'd all just get along. I want to see it. A smile on every face. What the actual... That's bad. I can't believe you're a professional songwriter writing that crap. That is a joke, dude. Bad.
Yeah, it's just generic. It's just like you just wasted 4 minutes of my life.
Yeah, I can't get those back. So then we go into Same Old Blues. It's like, okay, same old blues. He's back with a blues song. I'm ready for this. How long is it? It's 8 minutes. It's 8 minutes. You're not a prog artist. You're not going through different sweeping time changes and stuff. And it's just an old blues song with synths.
Yes. That sounds very strange. This sounds to me like he came to the recording studio with this and they're like, we need to jazz this up a little bit. You know what would be great? Synths.
I'm sorry, baby, but I can't afford to stay. Your good kind treatment will worry me someday. I love you, baby. Well,
Let's put them all over it, you know? I mean, and then the lyrics. I'm sorry, baby, but I can't afford to stay. Your good, kind treatment will worry me someday. I love you, baby, but I'm going to have to say goodbye. Woman, I got to move. I really got to fly. Okay, that sounds like a blues song to me. I miss you already, more than words can say. Seems like I've been gone 24 hours, more like a million days. Love you, baby. You know I wouldn't tell you no lies. If you don't believe I love you, look at the tears standing in my eyes. Okay, but it's 8 minutes. It's 8 minutes, and there's some burning guitar through it, but it's so slow. Even for a blues number, this is really slow.
Yeah. My note is this is a bed for him to just wail away on the guitar. Like he could be saying anything, and that the underneath part is just kind of a program generic deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eight is a little, that's a little much.
Out of a 50-minute album.
Yeah.
8 minutes. Crazy. And with 3 or so minutes left, he does start to do some real wailing on that thing. So I'm like, okay, here's some, but it's just, it seems like it was just kind of thrown together for me. I don't know. I don't feel like Phil overproduced this one.
Yeah, it's
who just had his birthday yesterday, by the way, as we're recording this. He's 74 years old.
Phil is? Well, happy birthday, Phil. Yeah, it just sounds like, I want to play the blues. Okay, just go ahead and do that, and go ahead and do that, and we'll build something around it.
Probably so. Yeah, well, all right. We've already spent too much time on that 8-minute song. Good Lord. But now here's another weird one. Knock on Wood.
All right.
Baby. Ooh. Now, we all know that version of it, that Eddie Floyd and the Colonel Cropper wrote that together, right?
Correct.
Wrote it for Eddie Floyd's album in the 60s, and it did fine. It's a fairly good song.
Yeah.
But it's Amy Stewart in 1979, the disco version that we know.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Now, for Eddie, it went to 28 on Billboard in the U.S., but it went to number 1 in R&B singles back in 1966. Otis Redding did a version of it the next year, and David Bowie eventually did a version of it, which I'm sure everyone thinks is brilliant because it's Bowie. But Amy with Two Eyes Stewart did it in 79, the disco version, and it went to number 1. Number 1.
Wow. Oh, right.
In the U.S. Number 1 on the Hot 100. Number 1! And top 10 around the world. Number 1 in Canada. Sold 2 million copies on its own. Pretty impressive, one would say.
But then the question would be why did you think you had to include it on this record?
Exactly. And so my only thought was that maybe it was something they would jam to. Because if Steve Cropper did it, that means Duck Dunn recorded it with him back in the day.
Probably, yeah.
And so Duck maybe said, do this,
Yeah.
and they start playing around with it, and he probably knows the words so he can sing it. That's what I said. The question is, it was a worldwide hit, the disco version, but why did he do it? Is it because of Duck Dunn? That's my note.
Yeah, it had to be something like that because it doesn't really seem like it makes sense on this record.
No.
I saw Steve Cropper's name on there, and so then I went to look to see if he'd done any work on this record, and the answer is no. But so I was a little disappointed because you always like to see Steve and Duck perform together.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it just seems odd. It just seems like an odd choice of any. You could cover any song that you wanted to. This is kind of a dull version, is what I have. Like you're just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah, there's synths. The synths and electric drums take the soul out of a soul song, basically. His voice is fine on it. He sings his voice is good, but the music is thin. Now, I do like the bass, but that's because the guy who wrote the bass is playing the bass. And so it's like, God, this is a skip if I've ever seen one.
Yeah.
So then you move into Something's Happening. Now, this is the second Jerry Lynn Williams album, song on the album that they kind of forced him to take. And once again, the lyrics are generic, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, everything about this song is generic.
And again, it has some kind of like island tinge to it.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, that's because they did it in Montserrat. No, I'm like, no, the Jerry Lynn stuff, they did in like North Hollywood in LA. So that's not why. And I just put, ugh, I don't like this. So dated.
And I think like the other song that he'd done before, this could have been anybody. Like it's just there's no Clapton soul to this. It's just It could have been 100 other people. It could have been somebody you never heard of before. This is just a filler piece on this. I would have liked to have heard the original version of this record because it can't be worse than this.
Well, his solos are not really inspired. They're just to match the song.
Yeah, I just put generic. It's just, okay, do a solo. All right.
My last note was fade out solo isn't horrible, but the song is. It's horrible. I can't believe that, like, okay, this guy's got great songs. We need.
Yeah, this is going to put us over the top.
Except that the next song, Forever Man, is by Jerry Lynn Williams, and it's a big hit for him.
Right. But my question is, why is it a big hit?
Because of the rhythm, because of the guitar solo?
Yes, because to me it's because of the guitar solo. The rest of the song is kind of like, it's okay, but when he starts wailing on that thing, now here we go. This is what we're here for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I always liked it. And the video with him kind of on the raised circular platform.
It's like smoky, and he just looks cool as hell. And I think it's interesting that technically Nathan East played on the track, but in the
video it's Duck. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who always looks exactly
maybe smoking
the same.
a pipe, or something.
Always looks exactly the same. He's got the afro. He's got the bass at exactly the same
spot.
Same spot. Yeah, you just know him by across the room there.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy, but he also seems like the guy. If you messed with him, he would punch you in the face.
Yes.
He's got those big fat bassist hands that would really knock you out. Actually, Godley and Cream directed this video, who were in charge of all sorts of videos back in the day, including Don't Cry by Asia. The video actually featured a falling camera rig, which wasn't supposed to happen, but because it did happen and they captured it on film, they decided to kind of let's just keep it in there.
We meant to do that.
But the girls, Sean and Marcy, look hot and they sound great. I don't know. I always liked it. And it went to #1 U.S. mainstream rock. That's a big deal for him. That's a huge deal. Only 26 on Billboard and 51 in the UK. So it never got on top of the pops or anything like that. But it sold a couple 100,000 in the US and over 500,000 worldwide. So that's a big, big deal with him. He was back with the song Too Bad, and it was released February 22nd, 1985, as the opening single ahead of its release on March 11th, as far as the album is concerned.
Try to be your forever man.
If you go look at Clapton and Winwood at Madison Square Garden, they play this one because Steve described it. He said, when we decided to get together, they said, we'll open up both of our catalogs, right? And we can go through and do anything from each other's catalogs. And Eric's catalog is much deeper. There's a lot more in there than mine. But Steve, plucked out Forever Man. He's like, I like this one.
Huh. Okay.
And they did kind of sing it as a duet, but I thought that Steve's singing on it was pretty outstanding. And I did see them play it live on tour as well. And it was an amazing tour to see those two legends together, not only doing the Blind Faith stuff, but like you said, let's play off of each other and do each other's stuff. And it kind of gave it a little new life because it was a hit in 85 and then it just went away. It's not one that he continued to play for a long time, but they dusted off and breathed some new life into it. I'm like, you know what? That was a good song back in 85, wasn't it?
You wonder why that fell off too, because it was a pretty big hit. They kind of put him back on the map. Maybe because it wasn't one of his. Who knows?
Maybe. And but he's got so much stuff that people want to hear from pre-1980. That, those are the big hits, right? The Cream and the Derek and the Dominoes and the Wonderful and all that kind of stuff. That's what people really want to hear, I guess. I don't know. Plus, he's always circling or recycling different blues stuff, whether it's from his latest album or the one 3 albums ago or the one 15 albums ago.
Well, that's what Lee said when we were talking to him. If you ask Clapton, well, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe we could do old blues stuff. Yeah. It's what he always comes back to.
It is. He always keeps coming back. He experiments with other things, whether it's reggae or country or folk or whatever. He always comes back to the blues.
I'm George Capitalis. This is my good brother, Terry Reed.
Right.
And you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
In London, right.
Now, okay, so that's a highlight.
Yes.
So we get to second. I honestly, I don't even know where the second side is. I assume it starts with Forever Man, but I could be wrong about that. We move on to It All Depends.
Okay.
Clapton, right? Is that an organ?
That's what it sounds like, yes.
Is he trying to go gospel?
He's getting serious now.
Do you think this one's about Pattie?
Could be, yeah, because, he's talking about observing somebody interacting with other people. And, he's so you think you're something special now is the lyric. Yeah, this definitely could be about her.
But it could also be about some other girl that he's macking on because, I've seen you with your other girlfriends. I can tell they really think you're fine. And I've seen you with your other men friends. They don't know if you're a love of mine. So maybe that's Pattie, maybe not.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it's also pretty repetitive. It all depends on how you feel, baby. I've got to know just how you feel, baby. It all depends on how you feel, baby. Like, it's okay. So you think you're something special. Well, is it your wife that you stole away from a guy in the biggest band in the history of the world special? So that's why I assume it's about someone else, but I don't know. It's hard to know for sure. It's so 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't even notice his guitar on this track.
I've got solo is light, but it follows along with the beat. It's just, you're just playing what the rest of the song is, or playing to the rest of the song.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing there. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just not much to it. I can imagine him being with Phil, and Phil's this like super positive guy, and he's with his buddies like Chris Stainton and Duck Dunn, and people are around him say, yeah, Eric, let's jam. And so he jams and starts to come up with some of this stuff, and then he writes out some of the lyrics like, hey, that makes sense. It rhymes. Okay, this is a good song, right? Oh, it's great, Eric. You're looking great, bud. And this is why Warner said, you know what? We need to write you a few more songs.
Yeah. While we like what you're doing, but
we're
maybe
not so sure it's going to get us where we want to go.
Right. The kids don't understand what's going on now, Eric. It's played to a different audience.
Yeah. So it all depends on if I want to stop the CD or just, turn the volume down and have it be background music. That's what it depends on.
How you feel, baby? I've got to know just how you feel, baby. It all depends on how you feel, baby. I've got to know just how you feel, baby.
We're going to move straight on to Tangled in Love.
Yeah.
This is one that Marcy wrote with her writing partner, Richard Feldman. Yes, she co-wrote Lay Down Sally, as we mentioned earlier, and he wrote for other people like the Pointer Sisters and produced Belinda Carlisle and others, won a Grammy. And my first question is, is this an Eric Clapton song?
Yeah. Or your first question could have been, why? Why did you do this? It's another professional songwriter deal, and this could be anybody. Again, this is song I think number 3 where we're saying this could have been 10, 15, 20 other people at this time.
I mean, at least it's upbeat, but it's pretty techno, and again, it's very mid 80s.
Yeah.
You hear it and you're like, oh, this is recorded in 84 or so. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Now, I'll give him some kudos on his singing, but again, the guitar is low in the mix, and it isn't doing a whole lot.
Yeah, I just have short on here. It kind of comes and goes real quick. This is not what we're here for.
No, it sounds like a cheesy 80s movie song. Like maybe when, while the credits are rolling or something like that. Not good. Now we get to Never Make You Cry. Now this is one that Clapton wrote with Phil.
Yeah.
And it's another slow one. And I won't say it's bad, but it is slow and sappy.
And he's got that low singing voice in this one. Yeah.
I mean, and it goes on for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
6 minutes.
Remember when you said you'd never make me cry? You're kind of making me cry right now, Eric.
I'll never make you cry. I'll never ever say goodbye. Can't you see it in my eye? Oh my God. Crap.
It's just sappy.
Crap. And it's pretty, I guess. Like it's a pretty song, but that's not what I'm looking for. Dude.
And it doesn't really fit into anything that you've done before either. Like that's I think one of my biggest criticisms of this record is it just sounds like you threw a whole bunch of stuff in a bowl, mixed it around, and then just threw it at me. It's not there's no rhyme or reason to why you did any of these songs.
Well, you're not the only one to think that, man, because like Rolling Stone said it was slick but inconsistent.
Okay.
And they were worried that, he's moving into commercial ballads and that would eventually see him, playing his greatest hits on the Vegas rock circuit in a review. Robert Christgau in the Village Voice, who shits on everything, described it as sad and also bad. And he's simply following the commercial market. He's not trying to do anything new or even say, I'm sticking to the blues. And this is what it is. All Music called it somewhat schizophrenic.
Right. Interesting.
I'll hold your hand and close my eyes. It's here I'm staying all of my life. I'll never ever make you cry. I'll never ever say goodbye. Can't you see?
Effective guitar work. It's competent, but it's not among his best. So people were not that enamored of it, nor should they have been, in my opinion. Now, Just a Prisoner, 10th song on the album of Clapton right now. This is definitely about Pattie. It is slow, but it is better.
This is definitely the bright spot in this. I had not heard this song before. This is it's dark, but I like it. It's very raw. And yeah, you can tell this is somebody he's not in a good place on this one. And you've got that cool, real simple bass riff that anchors the whole thing. And then he gets to wail on top of it and just tell you, I'm not in a good spot in my relationship life.
Yeah, I mean, this is good. I mean, bold vocals, big bright synths, and you can hear the guitar.
Yeah.
You can hear it. And my favorite note that I made is I at least believe him. Like I believe what he's singing to me. Mostly on this album, I don't.
Yeah.
It's not from the heart, but this is.
Yeah.
And he's letting loose on the guitar. I mean, he's letting it go on this one.
I think there are two specific drum parts on this record, like a left and a right. You've got both Collins and what is his name, Odeker, Jamie Odeker playing at the same time. So yeah, because I was kind of listening to it, and then I saw him do the She's Waiting, and they're both playing the drums.
Okay.
They got two drum kits, and then he said something about like, the left and right on this track. If I listen, you can hear it. I just think that's an interesting concept to have two separate pieces going at the same time. I really like this song. I think he's crying out for something on this thing, just to be heard. And yeah, my big pet peeve about this is it just ends. Like the song, like they just cut him off.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can feel the emotion coming through his guitar on this.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, where has this been? Where has this been throughout the rest of the album?
So was there more of this, and they just said this isn't commercially viable? So here's some light poppy stuff you can play.
I don't know. But this is good.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's real. It's got good guitar on it. You believe him when he said, "That's why you'll never know how I feel."
Yeah. Had you heard this song before, or were you familiar with this one?
Even though I own the album, I didn't remember this song because I feel like as soon as you put me through It All Depends and Tangle in Love and Never Make You Cry, I'm like, okay, let's put on something else.
Yeah, I think we're done with this. But this is why we do this, because you're slogging through this other stuff, and then you get to a track like this. Why have I never heard this? It's good. I would listen to it on its own.
Yes.
Yeah, I really, this definitely brought this whole thing back for me. You were losing me, and then you brought me back.
That's right. It's like, okay, yeah, that's great. You got me. All right. And then the last song, Behind the Sun, it's this 2-minute, not even really a finished thing. It's just him and his guitar about, kind of lamenting about losing Pattie, plus Collins on synths. It's a sad 2-minute closer. It's not even really a song.
Yeah, this one's pretty brutal because that's exactly what it is. He's not feeling it. He knows this thing is over. I know they said that there was something about they were thinking about a trial separation. Yeah, no, we're not trying anything. This is it. It's done.
Right. It's run its course. And that's what happens when we both have options and we've grown apart.
Right.
That's just part of life. But it's kind of when we finally got to Just a Prisoner, I'm like, okay, this is real Clapton. This is real emotion. And then they give you this kind of little bummer to send you off down the road.
And we're done.
Since you left, the darkness has begun. Smile like you used to shine on me. Nothing more than a memory. I see her face.
Now, here's the thing. There are other songs for the album that didn't make it, obviously, because you're always going to make at least 10 or 12 or 14 because you need some B-sides and all that kind of stuff. And they forced him to take these 4 Jerry Lynn Williams songs. Mm-hmm. Loving Your Lovin' was the 4th Jerry Williams song, and it ended up on the Wayne's World soundtrack. Okay. Years later. They used a bit of the music in the film, I feel like, when they're traveling from one place to another. They didn't really use his singing or vocals in it. It was just some of the music.
All right.
To kind of transition.
I don't remember. I mean, I heard this. I listened to the song. I don't remember it. Truthfully, it's been a minute since I've seen Wayne's World. I didn't remember it, but okay.
But it made it on the soundtrack, and the soundtrack did well because the movie did well. Heaven is One Step Away was on the Back to the Future soundtrack. Now, again, this is Hollywood embracing Clapton, like, okay, he's maybe not super hot hit maker MTV, but he can still make music that's relevant to put in a movie. And it was on Crossroads, so we knew this one.
Right. Yeah. And this was this is an interesting song, a little bit of an island beat on this one, you know, kind of a goofy little song. It's in Back to the Future, but it's 1 second of it, and it could have been anything. Like, it doesn't play an integral part in the
it's basically when Marty comes back to 1985.
Right.
He made it. He's psyched. He kind of crashes into, what was the Triple X movie theater or whatever.
Oh, correct. Yes.
You know, and then it's kind of on and back. Like, there's the homeless guys, like crazy drunk drivers. Like, that's playing on his little handheld radio.
Right. Yeah.
Next to the clock tower. But it is a good song. I mean, it's better than 70 or 80% of the stuff on the album. Should have been on the album.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
We searched all through the night. I couldn't find it. You couldn't find it. I knew something more than right. I couldn't find it. You couldn't find it. When they say heaven is one step away.
Too Bad was the B-side of Forever Man, and it was on Crossroads, but we didn't listen to it a whole lot. Jailbait was the B-side of She's Waiting. It's more upbeat than most of the songs on this album. Of course, you're talking about a girl who looks like she's 16.
Right.
Can't be singing that all the time.
Yeah. I don't even want to be associated with anything called Jailbait. Thank you.
It's long. It's got some changes. It's not that great, but honestly, there's about 40 seconds in there that would have been perfect for like the opening credits to an 80s sitcom. Right? Like, you're showing all, like, here's the dad, here's the mom, here's the kids, you know, that's kind of what the music reminded me of. One Jump Ahead of the Storm was never released. I've got the demo and it's kind of unfinished. And then there's another called You Don't Know Like I Know.
All right.
Produced by Phil, and it was released in Australia only. I feel like that means it was a B-side in Australia, like To Forever Man or something like that.
That one's actually, that's interesting because the song is not super exciting, but you can hear Eric and Phil singing different. I mean, you can pick both their voices out. It's just an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, it is, and honestly, I'd rather have that and Heaven is One Step Away. And maybe one of the others on the album. I could easily pick 3 or 4 that it could get rid of.
Yes, it's interesting to me how Heaven is One Step Away was not on the record, but on the box set, and they left a lot of this other stuff off.
Yeah, some singles they would leave off, but then they would put the B-sides on. Sometimes it's a big hit, it'll be on there. Sometimes they wouldn't. That's just kind of a choice they made. But I do like on box sets that they don't just give you all the hits. They got to give you some deep tracks, some stuff you can't get anywhere else.
Was Just Like a Prisoner on the box set?
No,
Then you suck.
I don't believe it was.
No, I kind of feel like if it was, we would have discovered that song.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. So that's it. That's Behind the Sun. It was a big step. I mean, his first ever music video, right? I mean, music videos were being made in the 70s. By 81, everyone had to have one because of MTV. And then he doesn't make his first until 1985, but with Godly and Cream, obviously. And that kind of starts him to be more of a modern rock star instead of just an old guy, a legacy.
A relic,
a
relic from the 70s, yeah.
And Jerry Lynn Williams did write the Wanna Make Love to You song, which did make it on Crossroads, like at the very, very end, right before the rework of After Midnight.
Yeah, which I love. That's awesome.
But Forever Man wasn't on here. She's Waiting's on here, and Too Bad is on here, and Heaven is One Step Away is on here. But no Forever Man. It was always kind of interesting to me, but again, I get it. You want to put rarer stuff or, some big hits, but if it's a minor hit, let's put the
and put the B-side on.
Let's put the B-side on instead.
It's really more for collectors.
Yeah. And it went triple platinum, which is pretty good for a 4 CD set. So
yeah.
Anyway, look, Clapton is a legend. I love his work. I do think he got a little tired in the last 20 or so years. I mean, he always went back to the blues, but then it just seems like he was just redoing a lot of old blues stuff. But that's okay, because I want to go see him live. The only problem is live, he played a few of the big 70s and 60s hits, and then he just did all of this blues stuff. And so eventually I kind of stopped going to see him because it's expensive, and I've seen him 7 or 8 times, and I don't want to just see a bunch of blues stuff.
And it's tough now too to put out something new because it's like, no, that's I'm going to do something completely different now. No, nobody wants to hear that. Besides,
he's 80. I mean, he's 80. There's no such thing as an 80-year-old pop star. There's barely such thing as an 80-year-old. I mean, the Stones aren't really trying to do new stuff. They're just regurgitating all those sweet old hits.
Right.
Although
the ones they can still play.
Yeah, and their last album's actually better than anything they've done in about 30, 40 years, whatever it is. But anyway, look, it's not my favorite album. It was a bit of a boost for him. It helped him, I feel like, get a foothold on some different things in Hollywood, working on soundtracks and things like that. And obviously going through some pain of losing Pattie helped produce some good songs. But I just feel like with all that help from Phil, from Ted Templeman, from all these great artists on there, from the breakup, you would think it would just be better, but maybe there was just too many cooks in the kitchen.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, you pounded on it too hard. You tried to put too many things together, and maybe that's what it was. It lacked any kind of cohesive flow to it. Maybe that was the problem.
Maybe so. You could have just had one like pop hit or two, and then all the rest blues. But you kind of deviated from even that. I feel like you experimented with some stuff that just wasn't great. And again, he's not an incredible songwriter. He might be good at coming up with guitars. I think he's a very good vocalist at this point in his career.
Yeah. If you keep it in his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But maybe he should always have someone help him write songs. I don't know. Well, I hope you enjoyed our look back at Behind the Sun by Eric Clapton. Obviously, Jackson and I are big Eric Clapton fans of what he's accomplished over his career. And since we've met our friend Lee Dixon, his longtime guitar tech, we thought we'd take the opportunity to go back and appreciate some of these albums that were a big deal for him. We've done 461 Ocean Boulevard, which was huge for him. And now we're doing Behind the Sun, which was maybe in a strange time for him. He wasn't exactly sure what to do, but it was at that time in the mid-'80s where a lot of the older 60s acts were finding a second life in the pop world. Like Tina Turner came back, and Steve Winwood came back, and Phil Collins, well, maybe he wasn't a 60s act, but he was certainly a 70s act, and now he was about the biggest thing on the planet. And that's why they got him to help Eric produce the record. And it may not all be great. There's definitely some good blues stuff on there. There's some stuff that's of the era. They're just kind of trying to find Clapton's place. But there's enough on there. There's a couple of little gems on there to make it worth the listen. And the bigger hits, I think, are solid. But it's not the sound that Clapton would continue to have throughout his career. And a lot of this stuff has been abandoned from his live set for a long time. But to hear Lee Dixon tell stories about it, it was a happy time for Clapton. He was in a good mood. Working with Phil was cool. They got to work at Montserrat. And then they got to come to Hollywood and LA for a while to do a few new songs. It was rolling well. And it went platinum after Money and Cigarettes had failed to do so. So this is Clapton going in the right direction again. And he got to play with a lot of his friends, like Nathan East, like Donald Duck Dunn, like Phil, Chris Dayton. It may not have had a huge cultural impact, but it was one leading Clapton back after the destruction he'd done to his mind and body during the 70s and early 80s, and proving to himself that he still had value as an artist making new music, not just as a legacy act. So we want to know, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Do we miss a point? Did we leave out your favorite part? Hey, you let us know. You can email us. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. Let us know the bands, the albums, the concerts, the DVDs, the rock properties you want to hear us talk about here on the show. Make sure you download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Those downloads are the lifeblood of growing our show. And if you really want to help us, guys, give us a 5-star review. It doesn't really matter where. Just go out and tell the world why you like our show. And then if you send it our way, we might just read it on an episode. Thanks as always to Pantheon Podcast for making us part of the family. And thanks to our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, where if you use the code UGLY, you can save 10% off one entire order. And you know they've got all sorts of stuff from over Clapton's epic 60-plus year career. That's it for this week. Next week, we're going to celebrate another guitar god with an album celebrating a big anniversary. So you're going to have to stay tuned for that. And until next time, to all you rockers all around the world, be cool and keep doing what you do to keep rock alive.